Hi, my name is JJ Kozak. I've been in the mole trapping business since 1994, and over the years I've seen a lot of different types of mole problems, and I've learned how to deal with each one of them effectively. In this video, we're going to use that experience to ensure that these are the last dollars you spend dealing with your mole problem. So with that, let's get started on the basics of mole trapping. There are 5 key ingredients to trapping moles successfully. Number 1, finding the best place to set. Number 2, opening the tunnel correctly. Number 3, preparing the trap properly. Number 4, setting the trap in just the right way. Number 5, covering the trap carefully. So let's talk about each of these components. Step number 1, finding the best place to set. The most logical place to go is the biggest pile, right? Wrong. Big piles are usually intersections of 2 separate tunnels and cause the mole to act unpredictably. Instead, we must first distinguish between the 2 types of tunnels, feeding and traveling tunnels, and that will help us locate a good spot for a trap. Feeding tunnels are usually in the middle of the lawn or garden, they do not follow a straight line, and they're shallow. Do you see how the tunnels are visible from the surface? Tunnels are not following a straight line. These kinds are typically in loose soil, as in sand or gardens. The tunnels again here are not in a straight line. They're deeper, but they are still feeding tunnels, and they're not straight. We do not want to set traps on these types of tunnels. The mole may return to these routes, but it's not a sure bet, unlike a traveling tunnel. Traveling tunnels may be less visible, but are not too difficult to find. These tunnels typically run alongside structures like fences, foundations, and driveways, and are 2 to 3 inches deep. These are the types of tunnels we want to use. The common key among all traveling tunnels is that they follow a straight line. The ideal situation is when you see a series of hills or an upraised tunnel along a structure, such as a foundation or driveway. The next best situation is a series of fresh mole hills or soil eruptions that appear in a straight line, even though they are not along a structure. If no traveling tunnels are apparent from the surface, you will need to look a little harder. The first step is to probe the dirt beside all structures that are close to mole activity. You are looking for a spot where your finger breaks through into an underground tunnel. If you have deep tunnels or hard soil, you may wish to use a metal probe to help in locating a traveling tunnel. An ideal traveling tunnel will be around 3 to 5 inches deep. If you are not able to locate a traveling tunnel, simply stamp down all activity in the lawn and wait for new tunnels to reappear. Look for mole hills that were previously stamped down and have since reappeared. If all else fails, simply go to the freshest mole hills or tunnels, wherever they may be. Now that we've learned how to find the best place to set, let's talk about opening the tunnel correctly. Opening the tunnel. Clear the dirt away. Find the exit point. Probe the exit point to determine which way the tunnel is heading. You are looking for a tunnel with only 2 entrances opposite to each other. If you find only 1 or 3 entrances, don't set the trap here. Once you have found a good location, open the tunnel by removing the top of it with a hand spade or similar device. You can even do this with your hand in soft soil. Be careful not to disturb the soil more than you need to. A correctly opened tunnel should be in a U-shape, so each side of the tunnel forms a barrier to prevent the mole from digging around the trap. If the side walls of the tunnel have been disturbed, it is critical that you rebuild them to recreate the U-shape. Moles take the path of least resistance through a tunnel, so take a few minutes to pack the sides and bottom of the tunnel firmly. This will ensure the mole enters the trap and hits the trigger correctly. After the tunnel has been opened, and we know that we have found a tunnel with only 2 entrances, we must clear the dirt properly. Use your index finger and thumb to pinch the dirt. This will enable you to scoop the dirt without pushing it back into the tunnels. To further ensure it will be clear, use your index and middle finger to sweep away the excess dirt out of the tunnel. Before we set the trap, let's be sure we understand how it will work. Moles are very meticulous about keeping their tunnels clean. They typically use them 2 to 3 times every few hours. The trigger on the trap will serve as an obstruction, and the mole will attempt to push it out of the way. When it does, the jaws will close on the mole like so.
And just like that, we've solved our mole problem. Let's focus on the preparation of the trap itself and go through a checklist that will ensure the trap will function properly when we place it into the tunnel. The first thing we need to check is that the jaws on the trap are free to function. As you can see here, they cross over. We do not want this because the trap will not close properly when we put it into the tunnel. As you can see now, they are free to function. This is what we want to see. Number 2, we need to check that the spring is functioning freely. This is very easy to check, and if it is not, all you need to do is put a light lubricant on it to ensure it will close. Once we are sure the trap will function correctly, we are now able to set it. A word of warning though, and I cannot stress this enough. Always ensure that one hand is on the trap and one hand is on the trigger. A trap springing freely onto a finger can cause serious injury, so be very careful. Before setting the trigger, it is a good idea to tie it to the trap with a string. This will ensure the trigger does not go missing. Be careful, however, not to use plastic ties, steel rods, or anything that will prevent the trap from closing properly. Setting the trigger. The MolePro comes with a universal trigger, which makes it an effective trap for moles of all sizes. The trigger can be flipped to create narrower or wider jaws. This is very important since the trap jaws need to rest snugly against the walls of the tunnel. Choose whichever setting makes the jaw open to the same width of the tunnel. If neither size fits perfectly, the jaws can be bent outward or inward slightly. Clamp arms together with one hand and take the trigger in the other. Place the trigger on the 2 notches. Ensure it is an equal distance from each set of jaws. The universal trigger can be set to a sensitive or stiff tension. We recommend it be set as sensitively as possible for best results. With the arms clamped firmly, start rocking the trigger back and forth until you know exactly when it will spring. Always ensure your other hand is firmly holding the 2 handles of the trap together so it will not activate while adjusting the trigger. Set it so that it is as close to the springing point as possible without actually setting off the trap. As a rule of thumb, you want to ensure the trigger will go off by pushing it lightly with a stick. Making the trigger sensitive will take some practice and patience, but this is an extremely important part, so take your time. When the trigger is set to its most sensitive point, you are ready to place it into the tunnel. Gently insert it into the opening you have created. Work the trap in until it fits snugly, being careful that the jaws are free to close. Now we're ready to cover the trap.
Cover the trap with the loosest, most dry soil you can possibly get. You may find the appropriate soil at the base of a large tree trunk among the roots, around a covered part of a house foundation, or in a child's sandbox. Sand is actually the perfect filler. The reason we do not want clumpy, wet soil is that using this type could cause the trap to jam or close improperly. After you have found enough good soil to cover the traps, we need to ensure that there are no rocks in the soil. We must now sift the dirt. You can rub it through your hands, you can use a spaghetti strainer, or you could use a regular sifter. As a rule, we do not want any rocks or sticks that are larger than a jelly bean. After the dirt has been sifted, scoop up a double handful and gently pour it into the tunnel opening. The trap should be covered up to the top part of the spring. Pat the dirt gently around the handles. The trap is now set and ready to go. In conclusion, I'd like to thank you for taking the time to watch this video. We've gone through the basic steps of trapping moles quickly, so I encourage you to go back and watch the steps again until you understand all that was discussed. For questions or comments on this video, please visit our website at www.molepro.com or email us at support@molepro.com.